This is the second lesson from the Blender for Beginners course series. We're continuing to model our location and we'll create this pier right here. I suggest starting with modeling the planks. I'm adding a cube. I press Shift-A and in the menu that opens, I add a cube. The cube has appeared at the origin. Let's move it along the Z-axis. I press G-Z and holding Control, move it up so it snaps to the grid. After that, I bring it forward, closer to us, by pressing GX and move it roughly over here. Let's switch to the side view and scale the cube down along the Z-axis. I press SZ and holding Control, scale it down. I scale it down to about 0.2 meters. To scale it with smaller increments, I hold Shift, and now I can set the size of this cube more precisely. I suggest leaving it at 0.3 meters. Alright, let's squash it along the X-axis. I press SX and scale it down. I'll stop at 0.5 meters. Along the Y-axis, I'll scale it down to 1.6. Like this. Duplicating these planks using Shift-D would be inefficient. So to start, let me move it along the X-axis. And now we go to the modifier's properties. Here, in the Generate tab, we choose the Array modifier. It creates duplicates of our model. In Factor X, we can set the offset. Let's set a small value to create a little gap like this. And in Count, we'll set the amount to 5, so 5 planks appear. They will be spaced equally apart. Just like that, we quickly created the base for our pier. Let's model the supports for this pier. To avoid adding a cube and modeling the plank all over again, we'll simply duplicate this object by pressing Shift-D. After that, we'll delete the Array modifier. Now we have a single plank. Let's rotate it along the Z-axis. To do this, I press RZ and type 90. Let's go to the side view, lower the object along the Z-axis, and move it along the Y-axis. Now, let's move it along the X-axis to roughly the middle of this pier. We'll increase the size along the X-axis about this much. The thickness can also be reduced. I suggest leaving it at 0.2 meters. To create an identical one, but on this side, we can use the Mirror modifier. But before that, the origin needs to be moved to the axis we'll be mirroring across. In this case, the X-axis. To do this, select the object, go to Object Arrow, Set Origin Arrow, Origin to 3D Cursor, and the origin has moved to the center of the coordinates, in this case, onto the X-axis. Now we can go to the Modifiers tab, click Generate, and choose the Mirror modifier. It mirrors our object along the X-axis. It can also do this along other axes. If you want to move these two planks further apart or closer together, we go into Edit mode. Selecting the entire mesh, we press GY. We bring them together or spread them apart, returning to Object mode. So we continue modeling the pier supports. Let's duplicate these two objects by pressing Shift-D, after which we go into Edit mode, select the entire mesh, and rotate them along the Y-axis by 90 degrees. Let's change their shape, making them a bit thicker. To do this, I press SX and increase their thickness. About this much. Let's lower the top face. For this, I switch to Face Select mode and pull it down. Let's switch to the side view and lower them just a bit. I suggest making them a bit narrower than these planks. To do this, I select the entire mesh, press S, then Shift-Z to lock the Z-axis. And now I scale them only along the X and Y axes. Let's move them along the X-axis, GX, about this much. On the reference, you can notice that they have a slight slant. Let's make it. We'll make it using the Shear Tool. We pull on this slider here, and this way we get a slant like this. Let's keep it small. Now let's shift them along the Y-axis a bit further away so they connect with these planks. Let's see how it looks from the side. Now it looks more like the reference. Let's model this plank here. To do this, we duplicate these two. I press Shift-D and move it up. We don't need the second copy, so let's delete the mirror modifier. Let's move this plank to the right spot. And let's also return the origin back to the center of the object. For this, I right-click arrow, set origin, and choose the origin to geometry function. You can also notice that this plank looks thinner than all the others. So let's go to the side view, into edit mode, and scale it down along the Z-axis, SZ, to about here. It also has a specific shape, some bends right here, here, and here. Let's move this edge a little bit back. For this, I double-tap G, activating the slide tool, and shift it backward. Let's also add a loop cut to create this unevenness. I press Ctrl-R, left-click, then right-click to cancel the sliding. Now we can alter the shape a bit. Press SY and make this plank wider. The back face can also be modified. We press SY and make it narrower. We can also create bevels, but before that, we need to apply the scale. We press Ctrl-A, Scale. We return back to edit mode, and let's create a bevel on this edge right here. We press Ctrl-B. Scrolling the mouse wheel increases the number of segments. Perhaps we should also add a bevel over here and slightly bend the plank in the middle. I press G-Z and change the shape. I double-click on this edge loop and press Ctrl-B to subdivide it into several parts. I'm doing this to give the object smoother shapes. Let's model these posts. To do this, I add a new object, press Shift-A, and choose Cylinder. In the bottom menu, we can specify the required number of vertices. 32 is a lot, so I'll divide them by 2 and get a value of 16. I suggest reducing the radius to 0.2 meters and the height to 0.7 meters. Now let's move this object. I press G-Z, after which I press G-Shift-Z and move it along 2 axes. I place it roughly over here. I raise it a bit higher, pressing G-Z. On the reference, you can see that the diameter at the bottom is slightly narrower, so let's go into edit mode. And now, we need to select the bottom face. To do this the fastest way, I press Alt-Z to turn on X-ray mode. It can also be toggled right here. I switch to face select mode by pressing 3 on the keyboard and select the bottom face. After that, I press S and decrease its diameter. I press Alt-Z to return to the normal viewing mode without X-ray. Let's represent the thickness of the bark. To do this, I'll select the top face, press I on the keyboard, and activate the Inset tool. It duplicates the vertices inside this face. To apply it, I left-click. If you want to change the parameters, open this menu and you can tweak them right here. I'll leave it as is. Let's raise this face a little higher. I press G-Z. And now, I press Tab to return to object mode. Right now, we see a flat polygonal shading. To smooth it out, I right-click. But this time, we select not Shade Smooth, but Shade Auto Smooth. A modifier has appeared. The angle parameter is responsible for the angle between faces that will create smoothing on the edges. The smaller this value, the more edges will be marked as sharp. The larger this value, the more edges will be smooth. Let's reset this parameter to its default value by pressing backspace. But we need this specific edge to be marked as sharp. So, in edit mode, I switch to edge select mode by pressing 2 on the keyboard. I right-click and choose the Mark Sharp function. I return back to object mode, and we get a model like this. We duplicate this post by pressing Shift-D, and I move it along the X-axis. I do it one more time, pressing Shift-D. Now we can add a bit of variety to these posts, tilt them in different directions, and slightly change their shape. Let's tilt this post in this direction. I press RY and give it a slight tilt. I check to make sure it intersects with the bottom plank. I select the middle one. I suggest making it slightly lower. I press Tab to enter edit mode. I switch to Vertex Select mode and select the top vertices, after which I press G, Z and lower it just a bit. In object mode, I tilt this post along the x-axis and lower it down. We can also move it slightly to the side over here, just adding more variation. This post here can also be edited. We go into edit mode, press Alt-Z to toggle X-ray mode, and select the bottom vertices. After that, I press S and make the bottom diameter slightly larger than the other posts. We can also scale this post up along the Z-axis. I select the top vertices and raise them a little higher. I'll tilt this post along the Y-axis, RY, by a couple of degrees. Great, the posts are ready. Perhaps during your workflow, while rotating around the scene, you might want to zoom in on a specific object to orbit exclusively around it. For example, I'm working on this post and want to zoom in on it. To do this, I press the period key on the numpad, but if you don't have a numpad, like I don't right now, we go to Edit, Preferences. To the Key Map section, type Frame Selected here, and find this shortcut. It shows the numpad period key, and we can remap it to the regular period key instead. After that, I click Save Preferences if autosave isn't enabled. We exit the preferences, and now, when pressing this period key, we will zoom in on the selected object like this. This way, we can switch and zoom in on the objects we need. We'll be orbiting exclusively around them. This drastically simplifies scene navigation. Let's zoom in on this object and model these ropes. Ropes are best modeled using curves. To create a curve, we open the Add Object menu by pressing Shift-A, and under Curve, we choose either Bezier or Path. In this case, Path will be more suitable. It appears at the origin, so we press G and move it over here. By pressing Tab, we enter Edit mode. Here, we can drag the points, thereby changing the curve's shape. Now I'll select all points by pressing A and scale this curve down, S, and I shrink it. We won't need these 2 points, so I'll select them, press X to dissolve vertices. Let's drop the middle point lower to create a bend like this. And we'll raise this one higher. Let's return to object mode and see how it looks from the side. Let's move the curve, GY, and shift it over here. Right now, it's just a curve. To give it shape, we go to the Object Data Properties menu, and here we have the resolution settings. To give it volume, we go down to the Geometry section, scroll down to Bevel, and right here, in the depth parameter, we enter 0.7 meters. Perfect. The rope is ready, but right now it has a very high resolution, higher than all the other objects. To see its mesh, let's switch to wireframe mode. Here, X-ray mode turned on automatically. Let's turn it off. And we can see just how dense the mesh of this rope is. To reduce the number of subdivisions, we can tweak them in this resolution parameter. Let's leave it around 6 to 5. And we can also adjust the resolution of the depth parameter right here. Let's set it to either 3 or 2. To return back to solid mode, we can click here or press the Z key and select this mode. Alright, the first rope is done. Let's duplicate this curve. I press Shift-DX and move it over here. In edit mode, I select the entire mesh and using the rotate tool, spin it like this. This point can be moved slightly down. This one down as well. Let's see how it looks in object mode. Let's create these ropes that wrap around the posts. To do this, I press Shift-A and under Curve, choose Circle. It appeared at the origin. I move it along the Z-axis and the X-axis. Let's immediately set its depth parameter to 0.7 meters. We'll go into edit mode and scale down this circle. Let's place it on the first post. To center on it, I press the period key and adjust the shape. We can also tilt it along the y-axis, roughly like this. Let's check it from all angles. Good. Let's change the resolution of this curve. Let's leave a 3 here and a 5 or 6 here. We'll duplicate it, Shift-DX. Let's place it on this post. We'll rotate it along the y-axis and set its position. Let's look from all angles. Looks not bad. We press Shift-DX and place the curve on the middle post. I think in this case, we can lower the curves at these points just a bit. Excellent. Now let's select all these curves holding Shift. After which I'll right-click and choose the Join function, meaning to merge them. Now it's a single object. We can change the thickness of these ropes if you need to. I'll change it to 0.6 meters. The ropes are ready. Let's look at the reference. Here you can notice that some planks are not parallel to each other. Some are smaller, some are larger. Let's do this. Let's select the object, go to the modifiers, and apply the array modifier. We click Apply. And now we can enter Edit mode. To separate all the planks into individual objects, I right-click, go to Separate, and choose the By Loose Parts function. We return to object mode by pressing Tab, and we see that all these planks have become separate objects. Let's select all these planks. Right-click and choose Set Origin to Geometry to move the origin for each object to its center of mass. Now we can play around with the rotation angle of some of these planks. For example, this one. I press RZ and rotate it by a couple of degrees. We can also move it slightly forward, and this one in turn, rotate the other way. Just like that. Let's see how it looks from this edge. Maybe we should add more rotation. We are creating a sort of rhythm. You can also change the width of these planks. For instance, make this plank a bit wider. Make this one a bit smaller. I'll enter Edit mode. In Edge Select mode, I'll select this edge. I'll double-tap G and lower it a little bit. I'll select this face and move it along the Y-axis in this direction. We are adding a little variation to these planks. Once we've done that, let's create this chamfer. To do this, let's go into Edit mode, into Vertex Select mode. For this, I press 1 on the keyboard, select this vertex, and press Ctrl-B. Nothing happened. But now we go to this menu and instead of edges, we choose vertices. And now we can notice that it has appeared. In this case, we've got a chamfer like this. This is exactly what we need. We can also move some of these vertices. By double-tapping G, we activate the slide tool. And I recommend applying the scale before creating this bevel. I didn't do it, but as you can see, it didn't affect the result in this case anyway. So I press Ctrl-A and apply the scale. We are practically finished modeling this pier. Let's create small bevels on these planks. To do this, I go to the Modifiers menu, under Generate, choose Bevel, and set it to 0.25. And for the number of segments, I input 2. I right-click and choose Shade Smooth. In the shading parameters, I check Hard Normals. Now we will duplicate this modifier to all the other objects, but before that, we must make sure their scale is applied. Therefore, I select all these planks, press Ctrl-A, and apply the scale. Lastly, I select the plank with the modifier. I go right here and click Copy to Selected. The modifier has been copied to all the objects I selected, after which I right-click and choose Shade Smooth. Let's change the bevel modifier for the lower beams. We'll make it a bit larger, roughly by this much. We can also go into Edit mode, into Face Select mode, turn on X-ray mode, and delete the top face so the bevel isn't applied to it. I press X and choose Faces. This way, we get a model like this. We can also increase this parameter even further. I'll make it 0.1 meters. Excellent. The pier is ready. To be honest, I forgot to keep the scene organized, so all our objects are currently in one collection. Let's select all the objects that belong to the pier, after which we'll press the M key on the keyboard, and a menu will pop up where we can add a new collection with the objects we have selected. We'll create this collection and name it. I press Enter, and the objects are placed inside this collection. So let's create the water. Let's look at the reference. It's a rectangular cuboid with rounded edges, and you can also notice that it has some sort of ripple texture on top. Let's select the main scene and add a cube to it. Shift A to cube. I'll switch to the side view, press S, hold Shift Z, and stretch the cube along the X and Y axes. I'll stretch it to about 13 meters. Along the Z-axis, we'll make it 1 meter. I press GZ and move it down along the Z-axis by 15 meters, so its top part sits at 0 coordinates on the Z-axis. The stones are currently sitting exactly on the water's surface. That doesn't work for us, so let's submerge them a little. I select the Stones collection, right-click, and choose the Select Objects function here. All the stones are selected. Now I press Tab, enter Edit mode, into Vertex Select mode. I turn on X-ray mode by pressing Alt-Z and select all the vertices at the bottom, after which I press GZ and move them inside the water, roughly by this much. I press Tab to return to Object mode, Alt-Z, turning off X-ray mode, and we got this shape. On the reference, you can see that the water in the back is slightly smaller than in the front. Therefore, I'll go into Edit mode, select the back vertices, and move them along the X-axis by about 1 meter this way. Now we're going to learn a new modifier. I select the object, go to the Modifiers tab, and under Generate, look for Subdivision Surface, meaning subdividing the model. Our object has become like a pancake. Now I'll enter Edit mode, and we'll notice that its shape actually remained the same. The modifier simply relies on the vertices as key points and builds a new topology from them. The more of these key points vertices there are, the more defined the shape is. Now, I'll undo these actions and return to Object mode. In the modifier, we'll set the subdivision level to 3 and make sure to apply the scale. I press Ctrl-A arrow scale. Pressing Tab, I enter Edit mode. And here we'll create bevels on the top and bottom faces. I press Ctrl-B and create bevels with 2 segments. You can notice that the water's shape has become sharper. I press Tab and create 2 loop cuts. Here, I press Ctrl-R, specify 2 segments with the mouse wheel, and 1 here. I select the edges in X-ray mode, after which I press Ctrl-B and create a simple bevel. I'm doing this by eye. Precision isn't required here. Alright, we've got this shape. Let's soften the shading. I right-click Arrow, Shade Smooth. Now we will create ripples on the water. To do this, we go to the Modifiers, and in the Deform tab, look for the Displace Modifier. It shifts the entire mesh of the model slightly to the side. We'll add a new texture and move on to setting it up. For the type, we'll choose Marble and immediately increase its size. We return to the Modifiers tab, and the strength can be reduced practically to 0. Right now, the modifier affects the entire mesh of the model, but we need the ripples to appear only on the top part without interacting with the bottom and sides in any way. We can limit the modifier's effect using Vertex Groups. Let's go into Edit mode, select the top faces, and in this tab, find Vertex Groups. We hit the plus icon to create a new one, And now we click Assign. This way, we've assigned our selected vertices into this group. We return to the Modifiers tab, and here specify our newly created group. Let's see how it looks. And here we can see how the group has restricted the effect of this modifier. Let's get closer to the object and look at its detailing. Right now it's very low, so in the subdivision settings, we'll increase the Levels Viewport parameter to 4 or 5. You can also notice that at the edges, where the ripples end, they cut off very abruptly. To fix this, we'll switch to the Weight Paint mode. This is what we were creating over here. Right now they look like this. Where it's red, the modifier is applied very actively. Where it's blue, it isn't applied. Currently, we have access to the low poly mesh of the model. Let's apply the subdivision modifier. We press Ctrl A, and now we have a high poly mesh. We set the weight value to 0 and the strength to half. And now we can carefully remove weights from the edges of this object using the brush or use the gradient tool. Let's switch to the top view and carefully brush away the weights from the edges of the object. I think this will be enough. We return to object mode. And let's look at the result. Now the edges look much neater. Suppose we want to change the direction of the wind blowing on this water so the ripples go in that direction. To do this, we need to change the coordinates type from local to object. And for the object, we'll use an empty. I press Shift A and choose plane axes. I scale it up. It appeared at the 0 coordinates. In the modifier, I use the eyedropper to select this object. It also affects the scale, the rotation of the texture, as well as its offset. With its help, we'll animate this water later on. Let's go to the texture settings. And here, we can change the turbulence, create more distortion, and give the water the look we want. I'm doing this by eye. I suggest dropping depth to 0, since we don't need high detail. I think this looks like waves now. And I will see you in the next lesson. See you soon.